evening, Moonprincess here, and tonight we're going to read a little bit out of this book here, Book of Unsolved Mysteries. Tonight we're going to read about Lizzie Borden, so let's get started. The Lizzie Borden Murder Mystery. Most people know the rhyme that begins, Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks. In reality, approximately 20 hatchet chops cut down Abby Borden, but no matter the number, Lizzie's stepmother was very much dead on that sultry August morning in 1892. Lizzie's father, Andrew, was killed about an hour later. His life was cut short by about a dozen hatchet chops to the head. No one knows who was guilty of these murders, but Lizzie has always carried the burden of suspicion. Andrew Borden, an American Scrooge. Andrew Jackson Borden had been one of the richest men in Fall River, Massachusetts, with a net worth of nearly $500,000. In 1892, that was an enormous wealth. Andrew was a shrewd businessman. At the time of his death, he was president of the Union Savings Bank and director of another bank, plus several profitable cotton mills. Despite his wealth, Andrew was miserly, hence the comparison to Scrooge. Though some of his neighbors' homes had running hot water, the three-story Borden home had just 2 cold water taps. That's so fucking weird. And there was no water available above the first floor. The Borden's only latrine was in the cellar. That's disgusting. So they generally used chamber pots that were either dumped onto the lawn behind the house or emptied into the cellar toilet. Disgusting. And although most wealthy people used gas lighting, the Bordens lit their house with kerosene lamps. Worst of all, for many years, Andrew was an undertaker who offered some of the lowest prices in town. He worked on the bodies in the basement of the Borden home, and allegedly, he bent the knees of the deceased, and in some cases, cut off their feet to fit the bodies into smaller, less expensive coffins in order to increase his business. So despite the brutality of Andrew's murder, it seems that few people mourned his loss. The question wasn't why he was killed, but who did it. Lizzie versus William. In 1997, when psychic Joe Doherty, visited the murder site, she uncovered several clues about the Lizzie Borden case. Doherty felt that the real murderer was someone named Willie. There is no real evidence to support this claim, but some say Andrew had an illegitimate son named William, who may have spent time as an inmate in an insane asylum. His constant companion was reportedly his hatchet, which he talked to as though it were a friend. Also, at least one witness reportedly saw William at the Borden house on the day of the murders. William was supposedly there to challenge Andrew about his new will. Was William the killer? A few years after the murders, William took poison and then hung himself in the woods. Near his swinging body, he reportedly left his hatchet on the ground. So with William dead and Lizzie already acquitted, the Borden murder case was put to rest. Lizzie's forbidden romance. One of the most curious explanations for the murder involves the Borden servant, Bridget Sullivan. Her participation has always raised questions. Like the other members of the Borden household, Bridget had suffered from apparent food poisoning the night before the murders. She claimed to have been ill in the backyard of the Borden home during the time Abby was being murdered. Bridget was apparently washing windows in the back of the house. Later, when Andrew was killed, Bridget was resting in her room upstairs. Why didn't she hear 2 people being butchered? According to some theories, Lizzie and Bridget had been romantically involved. In this version of the story, their relationship was discovered shortly before the murders. Around this same time, Andrew was reportedly rewriting his will. His wife was now Mrs. Borden, to Lizzie, not mother. stepmother for many years. The reason for the estrangement was never clear. Lizzie also had a strange relationship with her father and had given him her high school ring as though he were her sweetheart. He wore the ring on his pinky finger and was buried with it. Just a day before the murders, Lizzie had been attempting to purchase prussic acid, a deadly poison, and the family came down with food poisoning that night. Sus. Very sus. Sorry. Some speculate that Bridget was Lizzie's accomplice in the murders and helped to clean up the blood afterward. This theory was bolstered when a few years after the murders, Lizzie became involved with an actress, Nance O'Neill. For 2 years, Lizzie and the actors were inseparable. This prompted Emma Borden, Lizzie's sister, to move out of their home. At the time, the rift between the sisters sparked rumors that either Lizzie or Emma might reveal more about the other's role in the 1892 murders. However, neither of them said anything new about the killings. Who done it? Most people believe that Lizzie was the killer. She was the only one accused of the crime with good reason. Lizzie appeared to be the only one in the house at the same time, other than Bridget. She showed no signs of grief when the murders were discovered. That's a big red flag. During questioning, Lizzie changed her story several times. The evidence was entirely circumstantial, but it was compelling enough to go to trial. Ultimately, the jury accepted her attorney's closing argument that the murders were morally and physically impossible for this young woman defendant. In other words, Lizzie had to be innocent because she was petite and well-bred. In 19th century New England, that seemed like a logical and persuasive defense. Lizzie went free and no one else was charged with the crimes. But Lizzie wasn't the only one with motive, means, and opportunity. The most likely suspects were family members, working alone or with other relatives. Only a few had solid alibis, and like Lizzie, many changed their stories during police questioning. But there was never enough evidence to officially accuse anyone other than Lizzie. So whether or not Lizzie Borden took an axe and killed her parents, she's the one best remembered for the crime. Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast. The Borden house has been sold several times over the years, but today it is bed and breakfast. The main draw, of course, being the building's macabre history. The Victorian residence has been restored to reflect the details of the Borden home at the time of the murders, including the couch on which Andrew lay, his skull hideously smashed. As a guest, you can stay in one of the 6 rooms, even the one in which Abby was murdered. Then after a good night's sleep, you'll be treated to a breakfast reminiscent of one of the Bordens had on their final mornings in 1892. That is, if you got to sleep at all. They say the place is haunted. As with all good morbid attractions, the proprietors at the Lizzie Borden B&B don't take themselves too seriously. Before you leave, you can stop by the gift shop and pick up a pair of hatchet earrings, and I survived the night at the Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast t-shirt, or an axe-wielding Lizzie Borden bobblehead. I would like all of those, please, but I don't think I want to sleep overnight in the Borden house. I don't know. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. I really enjoy telling these stories, and I'm definitely going to be actually covering this case at some point. I have a few that I'm working on here that I'm going to mention really quick for you. I'm planning to do a video where I talk about crawlers. I found an article on crawlers, Victorian crawlers. So I'm going to eventually be covering that, as well as I have Dr. Griffin pretty much done, so I'm going to be covering that soon. In the case of was murdered by Kyoka Demeach, I'm going to cover that one as well. And then there was a couple in New Orleans that I'm going to cover. Of course, Jack the Ripper, of course. So the New Orleans case I'm going to cover at some point is the story of Zach and Addie. I've always found it